All right, everyone. I'm Stephen Panofsky, and I'm going to walk you through installing a clean version of Veeam Backup and Replication on a local endpoint and connecting that to our cloud repository for the purposes of restoring any kind of file or any kind of data from the cloud repository. So the very first step is to obtain the Veeam Backup and Replication ISO. You can get this from UBX Cloud via a link. We'll share you the Veeam Care pack and the password that can access the files themselves, or you can log into Veeam's website and request the latest version as well. They'll send you an email link with all the required downloads. The one of interest is going to be the Veeam Backup and Replication ISO. Once you downloaded the ISO, you just run the setup and install the very first option, which is the Veeam Backup and Replication. The installation, depending on your computer's horsepower, will probably take about 10 or 15 minutes, and it'll install some prerequisites and an empty SQL database along with a traditional Windows application to manage all the Veeam components that are required for any restore operations. And there's no license file that's required, so when you actually go through the setup, it'll ask you to specify a license file. You can just click next, because for any kind of restores, no license file is required. Okay. Once the installation is complete, you'll launch it. It can be installed on any Windows desktop, Windows Server, Home, or Professional Edition. It's designed to be a pretty lightweight client used for just management. So once that's complete, you'll get a screen that looks just like this, and there's not going to be much in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to define the service provider profile inside of the Veeam Backup and Replication setup, and that will communicate with the Veeam service provider environment at UBX. That'll retrieve all your restore point data and the data that we have in the repository, and it will inventory it on this installation of Veeam Backup and Replication console. And then from there, you can do any kind of restore operations. So the very first step is to go to Backup Infrastructure and select Service Provider, and then Add Service Provider. And you can speak to your, any UBX staff member can get you the region details for where your cloud repository is located, and the credentials to access it. I have some here that I'm going to be using, but yours may vary. And the host name that we communicate to is going to be the one for the specific region that you're in, and the port's always going to be 6180. So the only two ports that are required for this solution to communicate is going to be port 6180 and port 443. Okay, and then I'll hit next. It'll validate the certificate because the backup data is encrypted as the data is transacted between the cloud repository and your local endpoint. All right, now I need to add my credentials. So this is going to be the same Cloud Connect credentials that you were provided when you subscribed to our service. And as mentioned, if you don't have the credentials, a staff member can get those for you. And now the credentials are saved. We can hit apply. And here's the repositories that this account has access to. And just hit apply again. And they've been added. Great. Now we can confirm, if we go to the Backup Repository tab, you'll see that the two cloud repositories are now showing up on here, and we can rescan them to add them to the inventory. But when you first add them, they'll already be inventoried on this local Backup and Replication console. Cool. So now that I go to the Home tab, now the key for backup show up, because now I actually have backup data here. So I can select the cloud repository, And for this particular account, I only have backups from backup agents. So it's one server and 2 notebooks. And as you can see, I have my restore points listed, I have the cloud repository locations listed, and I have the platform that these systems came from. The neat thing about how Veeam handles this is that you can have restore points in the Cloud Connect repositories from various systems, VMware, Windows, Mac, physical servers, servers that exist in other cloud environments, and they'll all be displayed here so that you can recover data from them, you can manage the data, you can extract the data, you can verify the data. So for this particular one, I'm just looking at this notebook right here, and I can select properties, and I can get an understanding of the restore points, the size of the restore points, the total backup size, and everything relevant to what's inside that cloud repository. And now that it's actually showing up in my console, I can actually do any kind of restores. So for the nice thing about Veeam is that it's it's kind of it understands the backup data that you're giving it. So if you're giving it regular Windows desktop OS, it will present you with tools that are specific for that. So it'll let you do volume restores, it'll let you do guest file restores. If you select something that has application-aware data inside of it, like an Active Directory server or a SQL server or an Exchange server, it will present you with more options because it understands that there's more types of data inside these systems. So, for example, it understands that this server has an Active Directory database and a SQL database on there. So you can open up the recovery tools specific to those applications. So if I wanted to restore an Active Directory object that was deleted by accident, I can select the Active Directory Object Explorer and retrieve just that object if I wanted to. Or if I just wanted to restore some files from this server or from my notebook, I can do the same as well. So selecting this option, for example, will bring up a list of restore points that I can pick from. And it will take a minute. There we go. And I can select which increment that I want to pull from. And then once I hit next, it'll open up the File Explorer window with all the files that were in that restore point from that point in time. And I can copy the files off of it. I can verify it. I could restore the volumes themselves, or if it's a virtual machine, I can restore the virtual machine itself into any other environment. So that concludes this short tutorial. But this tool can be installed completely independent of where your backups are being taken, your on-site backups and where your off-site backups are located. So you can install this on a local machine, desktop, anywhere. It's really versatile, and it just takes a few minutes to get taken care of and get this done. And it gives you a lot of possibilities when it comes to recovery. The only caveat that I would mention is that if you're doing any kind of restores, or if you're making any changes, if you're doing any kind of restores, you will lock the restore point that's in the cloud repository. So if you're sending a backup copy job to the cloud repository while you're in the middle of a restore, the backup copy job will fail, and it will wait until the data is unlocked in the cloud repository. So I recommend that you just pause your backup copy jobs if you're going to be doing any kind of verification or testing, so that way there is no conflict between the two processes. But that kind of restriction is going to be in place no matter what, whether you're if you're trying to change the content of a file and then restore and read from that file, only one of those operations can be happening at the same time. So that's about it. I hope that this video proves insightful, and cloud responsibly. Thanks.